Buddhism started with one man's mission to escape the world, to find a permanent way out of suffering. So how in the world did this deeply personal, inward-looking path become a force that built kingdoms, inspired empires, and today shapes entire national identities? Well, that's exactly the puzzle we're going to piece together today as we dive into the social history of Buddhism.
But to get there, we actually have to start with a very modern and frankly, a very weird question. What on earth is a Protestant Buddhist? I mean, those two words feel like they're from completely different planets, right? But as you're about to see, this strange, contradictory idea holds the key to our entire story. Okay, let's just jump right in. Take a look at some of these features of modern Buddhism, especially in a place like Sri Lanka. You've got Buddhist army chaplains, Buddhist Sunday schools, a young men's Buddhist association, the YMBA, even a Buddhist flag. All of this stuff just screams Protestant Christianity, doesn't it? It's not what you'd expect from a 2,500-year-old Eastern religion. So what is going on here? So yeah, let's kick things off with this surprising modern Buddhist. This whole phenomenon of Protestant Buddhism is our starting point. It's a puzzle that really forces us to ask, how, and maybe more importantly, why, can a religion change itself so dramatically? And to solve it, we've got to go way back, like 2,500 years back, to the world the Buddha himself was born into, and see just how radical his original solution really was. All right, that brings us to part 2, the Buddha's radical solution. Now to get this, you have to picture the scene. The Buddha was born into a society completely dominated by Brahmanism, a world that was all about rigid rituals and a super strict social hierarchy, what we know as the caste system. And this slide right here, this lays out the whole revolution. On one hand, you have the Brahmanical world. It was all about what you did, the right rituals for your specific caste, a status you were just born into, no questions asked. But then the Buddha comes along and just flips the whole thing on its head. He said it's not what you do, it's why you do it, your intention. He threw out the idea of status by birth and said, no, it's about what you achieve through your own effort. He replaced the authority of ancient texts and priests with the power of your own personal insight. It was a total game changer. And this quote, this is everything. The Buddha took the word kama, which we know as karma, and which just meant action, and he redefined it completely. He said, it is intention that I call kama. All of a sudden, what mattered wasn't the fancy ritual, but what was going on in your head when you did it. This one single idea basically pulled the rug out from under the entire ethical justification for the caste system. A good intention is a good intention, whether you're a king or a street sweeper. So you're probably thinking, okay, this message must have been a huge hit with the poor and the downtrodden, right? Well, the data tells a totally different story. If you look at who the first monks and nuns actually were, a staggering 40% were Brahmins, the very priests whose power he was challenging. They, along with the royals and the merchants, were the vast majority. This wasn't a revolution from the bottom up. It was an intellectual earthquake that shook the highest levels of society. Okay, so you've got this movement. It's popular with the elites, and it's all about individual escape from the world. That creates a huge problem, right? How does a philosophy for people trying to leave society actually manage to survive in society? How does it pay the bills, so to speak? To really get this, we need to break down two types of religion. Early Buddhism was a classic soteriology. It answers the question, what must I do to be saved? It's all about the individual. But societies also need a communal religion, something that handles weddings, funerals, harvests, all this stuff that holds the community together. The Buddhist path didn't really have answers for that stuff, which left a big gap. So the solution they came up with was, honestly, it was genius. It's this perfect, self-sustaining loop called the cycle of merit. Here's how it works. The regular folks, the laity, they provide the monks and nuns with the basics, food, robes, a place to stay. This frees up the monastics, the Sangha, to focus on preserving and teaching the Dhamma. And then, the Sangha gives the gift of the Dhamma back to the community through spiritual guidance. By supporting the monks, the lay people earn good karma, or merit, for a better next life. Everybody wins. It's a perfect symbiotic relationship. So, that system works great on a small scale. But how did it get so big? Well, that brings us to our next section, looking at how religion, rulers, and identity all got tangled up. We're about to see how this brilliant local solution scaled up to shape not just villages, but entire empires. Let's look at a quick timeline to see how this all unfolded. You've got the Buddha's life, of course, but then, a couple hundred years later, this absolute game changer comes along, Emperor Ashoka. He's the guy who really takes Buddhism from a philosophy and turns it into an institution. He sends missions all over, including to Sri Lanka, which sets the stage for everything that comes later.
The key thing to get about Ashoka is that he looked at the Buddha's universal ethics and saw a user manual for running a massive, diverse empire. He promoted things like nonviolence and social welfare, literally carving these rules onto giant stone pillars for everyone to see. He took the Buddha's advice for how a person should live and made it the state policy for how a government should rule.
And that brings us right back to where we started. We've seen how Buddhism learned to work with society and even with the state. Now let's finally solve that puzzle of the Protestant Buddhist by looking at what happened when it faced its biggest modern threat.
Okay, fast forward to the 1800s. Sri Lanka, then called Ceylon, is under British rule. And with the British come these very energetic, very organized Protestant Christian missionaries. They show up with printing presses, they build schools, and they love a good public debate, all to prove that Buddhism was outdated and needed to be replaced.
And what happens next is this incredible back and forth, almost like a chess match. You can see it right here. The missionaries use printing presses to attack Buddhism. The Buddhists buy their own presses and print replies. Missionaries challenge them to debates. A charismatic monk named Gunananda says, "Bring it on," and turns the debates into huge public rallies. Missionaries build schools. Buddhists build their own schools right next door. They basically took their opponent's playbook and used it against them. And just to give you a sense of the scale here, the energy was off the charts. That monk, Gunananda, the star of the debates, claimed he gave over 4,000 public talks and sermons in his career. This was an all-out, passionate campaign to protect and revitalize their faith.
And that right there is our answer. Protestant Buddhism is what scholars call this modern form. It's Buddhism that, under immense pressure, basically adopted the organizational tools of its Protestant rivals in order to survive. The lay organizations, the focus on schools, the media, the national pride, it all clicks into place. The YMBA, the Sunday schools, the flag, it all makes perfect sense now.
So really, when you boil it all down, it's the same pattern repeating. Just like ancient Buddhism had to build a relationship with lay society to survive, modern Buddhism had to borrow the tools of its competitors to defend itself. It turns out the path of renunciation has always had to get its hands dirty and engage with the world in order to endure.
And that really gets to the core lesson of this whole story. We tend to think of religion as this ancient, unchanging set of rules. But what this history shows us is that a religion is much more like a living thing. It's a social history that is constantly adapting, evolving, and reinventing itself to meet the challenges of the world.
From the Buddha's revolution of intention, to the brilliant cycle of merit, to the modern Protestant revival, Buddhism has never stood still. And that leaves us with one final thought. As our world keeps changing at lightning speed, what do you think the next Buddhism will look like?